And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is The Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Well, they're at it, and you knew they were going to be at it. You knew this was coming, been waiting for it, been prepping for it. Spent a little time reading about the 12th Amendment, spent a little time looking at all the shenanigans, because understand, Republicans have been funding a lot of think tanks and a lot of legal firms and a lot of smart people to figure out how they're going to control this country. Their plan from 1971 forward, the Powell Memo, to this moment, masterfully executed. Not surprising. So when I hear Donald Trump say, well, we don't really want it to go back in front of the Supreme Court. We don't really want it to go to Congress. We want to win at the ballot box. But, if it were to go to Congress, we've got a 26-22 lead. And I guarantee there's nobody in that crowd. There are none of the Trumpkins who have thought 26-22. There are none of them who have any clue of what the Orange Menace, the Marmalade Mussolini has muttered. They have no idea. But he does. Because trust me, they've thought this through. They've gamed it out. And they've been gaming this stuff out for a while, waiting for the perfect moment when they could actually again steal another election. Only this time, use a different device. They're doing what they did in 2000 down in Florida. You know that's coming. Only, as Greg Palast said yesterday, it's not going to be the Brooks Brother riot that it was. It's going to be the Boogaloo Boys, the Proud Boys, or whatever white nationalist nitwits are going to show up with their costumes and their guns and everything, and they're going to cause real chaos. But across this country, you've got the Trumpkins, the legal minds, the best paid legal minds in the world, mind you, out there figuring out how they're going to steal this election from we the people. They don't care who votes. They don't care about the vote. They've already begun undermining what the vote results are going to be. They're doing that at every minute. And they're training their minions to believe that it's all going to be rigged. They're stealing it from us. Don't believe anything that comes from the election results. Even though the polling shows he's getting clobbered because he's done a horrible job. And people, millions of people unemployed, millions of people worried about losing their health care because he's pursuing an end to the Affordable Care Act in the Supreme Court. Never mind that. They're stealing it from us. And they're going to do it by going back to the original intent. The old original intent is the Scalia types. No blacks voting, no women voting, no white poor guys voting, just rich white landowners, men. That's it. Nobody else. And also, which is why they didn't allow, the popular vote to decide who the president and the vice president was. That was all done by electors. It was all done by the House and the Senate. It was all done by state legislators. They didn't allow it to us. So when I saw this story today, that here in my state of Pennsylvania, our good folks here in PA, they have pushed through the House Government Committee on a party line 15-10 vote. And a special election integrity committee. Think of it as a theft committee. Think of it as the people who are going to undo what the ballot says. So they're probably not even going to want to count every ballot. They're going to want to look for every opportunity to find and create flaws so they can say, it's all bad. We'll decide. Because here in Pennsylvania, Republicans control the House. Now, this committee, this bipartisan election integrity committee, will be 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. So it's my view the Democrats shouldn't even bother showing up because it's going to be a 3-2 railroad. You know that. And it's going to end up in front of the 6-3 railroaded Supreme Court. The theft is already happening. And, most people haven't even thought of casting their ballots yet. which is why I keep saying we need to overwhelmingly go to the polls, to where what's on paper and what comes out of machines is so enormous, is so overwhelming, that these elected officials fear for their own elections in the next cycle. That's the only thing that's going to save us. Now, this is one of those weird moments where we're in kind of chaos land. They're talking, well, it could be a 269 election, which, every time that comes up, then all of the scenarios keep popping up that, oh, well, it's going to go back to the House of Representatives, and the House of Representatives is going to have to decide, because the 12th Amendment had to go back and remember the 12th Amendment, which, back in the old days, each state, got a vote for president and a second vote. So whoever got the most votes became president. Whoever got the second most votes became vice president. Pretty simple. The first election, George Washington overwhelmingly won, unanimously won. 69 of the electors voted for him. Pretty simple. He got like 90% of the popular vote. Nothing surprising about that. The second person, John Adams, got 40. I think it was 45. And then the rest of them, 35, and the other 34 were split up between like 9 or 10 other people. The 12th Amendment did away with that. We now vote for, each state has still the 2 votes, but they vote for the president and vice president, not number 1 and number 2. Now, what will happen in the 269 vote, as I understand it, the Senate will vote for vice president, and the vice president will be a Republican. And you would think that in the House, since the Democrats control the House, that it would be a Democrat. That's not accurate. This is where the 26-22 comes in. It's actually done by state delegations. So Pennsylvania, for instance, has 18 congressional representatives. They have an equal number Democrat-Republican. So it's pretty much a wash. We probably don't even get a vote in this scenario. But let's say Alaska, that has 1 Republican representative, that's 1 Republican vote. Whereas California, who has something like 50, they get 1 vote. So they've already gamed this out, that it doesn't matter how many representatives you have. It's if your delegation is Republican or a Democratic-leaning delegation. Michigan, for instance, has 7 Democrats, 6 Republicans, and just an Amash. You could make Michigan a wash if Amash goes with the Republicans. I doubt he will, but it could. So this is where this 26-22 thing comes from. So, the fact that he blurted that out, and I've said this about Trump before, when someone says something around him, it's in the front of his brain and he's got diarrhea of the mouth, it comes out. So the fact that he let that out is telling you they're already thinking about it. They're planning for it. They're actually working for it. And you see this all around the country as all of these different lawsuits keep popping up and all of these different schemes keep popping up. Like I said, here in Pennsylvania, you knew this was going to happen. In South Carolina, they're going to the Supreme Court as we speak to mandate they return the signature witness on the ballot. I guess yesterday, it was the fourth District Court of Appeals said no, we're not going to reinstate the witness signature. Ballots have already gone out. Votes are already being cast. We can't go back. They're going to go in front of the Supreme Court and ask for this to happen. Now, you've got right now a 5-3 court. Who knows if do they take it? Does it happen this close to an election? I don't know. This is scary moments. Also in Texas. Texas is going and shutting down places for people to drop off their ballots in the middle of a pandemic. Greg Abbott today issued a proclamation that all of the hand-delivered ballots can only go into a single location per county. One single location. Stop and think about that for a second. Now, if they wanted to make it even harder, they could have made it 1 per congressional district, which would have made people go, I don't even know what congressional district I'm in. And that would have really done a great job of suppressing the vote, which is what all of this stuff is meant to do. It's meant to suppress the vote. It's meant to give Republicans an opportunity to fight in court their stacked courts. Because understand, Trump and the Republicans know that they have stacked the courts with really crazy right-wing justices and judges across this country. They're going to play what they've set up. And look, honestly and truthfully, do I blame them? I get the power game. I get it. But if that's the game, let everybody know what you're doing. Don't lie and say, oh, we're just following the Constitution. Don't lie and say, oh, we're just protecting the integrity of the ballots. Just tell us what you're doing. You're lying, you're cheating, you're stealing. You've got the power and you're going to abuse it. That's what it is. So, going to be interesting to see how this plays out here in Pennsylvania because, quite frankly, the Republican legislature here could conceivably, even if Joe Biden, and I expect Joe Biden to win Pennsylvania, when Joe Biden wins the majority of votes here in this state, I expect the Republican-led House of Representatives to steal it from him. I absolutely do. And that means what are we going to do about it? And we've been talking about this for a while, in those days after the election, after November 3rd, because I don't expect it to be called. Hoping the in-person ballots are way off the charts because they're going to fight as hard as they can, and it's going to get ugly. Speaking of getting ugly, evidently still no deal on the stimulus, no help for states, no help for the airline industry, no help for workers, nothing as of right now. Now, as I understand. Tomorrow, the House Democrats are going to move forward and push a $2.2 trillion relief bill. The Senate Republicans say we're not giving anything over $1 trillion. The White House has countered, I guess, with a $1.6 trillion offer because they want the deal, because they need it. Mitch McConnell and the Republicans know, and you got to wonder if they already know the rig is in, if they know. Because, you look at some of the polling in some of these Senate races, it's not looking good. Not looking good for the GOP. But this is one of those moments where you have to ask, what are our representatives doing to help us? There's a lot of pain and suffering out there, and they're doing nothing. Now, there's a bipartisan coalition, a new caucus, the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. They have come forth with a $2 trillion coronavirus bill. Some testing money for testing and for healthcare, about $100 billion for the COVID stuff. Some direct money for individuals and families because the layoffs are coming in huge numbers, and it's only going to get worse in the coming months. There's $120 billion to enhance unemployment benefits. There's $290 billion for small businesses. There's money for childcare. There's $500 billion for state and local governments to be able to function as state tax revenues and local revenues continue to plummet. There's also some money for election security because heaven knows we need it because, well, the thieves are in the den and they're in the courtrooms. And also there's some money in there for the Postal Service and to do some other stuff, broadband expansion and agricultural stuff, some investments. One of the things I'm not thrilled about is they're talking about liability protections. I want to see what the details of those are. I am not in favor of blanket immunity for employers if workers get sick. Sorry, not going to happen. Now, sad reality, October 1st has come, soon gone. That means the airline industry is free now to go and lay people off like crazy. In fact, American Airlines said that on Thursday they are going to begin, that would be today, they're going to begin laying off some 19,000 employees. United Airlines last month warned that they were going to lay off 16,000. Spirit Air going to dump 1,000 out of Florida. And then you go down, Delta is saying that they're planning layoffs at some point, maybe not until after November 1st. And then you get everywhere else. We saw last week it was Disney. We're seeing Allstate going to lay off about 8% of their workforce. Shell's laying off a bunch of people. Ralph Lauren. Go down the list. Even the defense contractor Raytheon is dumping 15,000 workers. And you keep going. And look, I can go on. I got a whole list of thousands, tens of thousands. and we can't get Congress to do anything. And look, in 2009, I was talking about going to the German model of ensuring that nobody loses their job, that they stay attached to the workplace, that they stay attached to their benefits, and there be a program to help folks, trim the number of hours they work, some subsidies for companies to keep their employees on the books, and to have the program in place so that folks stay attached to the workplace and still collect about the same of what they were making if they were working full-time. Keeping the economy afloat, because this is all about making sure the economy doesn't completely crater. Because guess what? The CARES Act did exactly what it was supposed to do. It kept us out of a depression. If we don't get something now, moving forward, when the next wave hits, we're seriously going to crater into a depression. There's no question about that in my view. And the sad reality is, this administration is not doing anything to move us in the right direction. They're not. And Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are doing everything they can possibly do to ensure that nothing gets done. So for all the talk and all the screaming about, oh, Governor Wolf, they won't let us have, full restaurants or full bars. We can't go drink and have 1,000 people in a room. He's the reason the economy is going bad. No, he's doing the right thing. Pennsylvania is one of the states that's doing okay. We're not skyrocketing. We're ticking up, but we're not into a full-fledged skyrocket. Sad reality, folks. If we do what these Republican states want to do, if we do what Trump wants to do, come November, we could be in a real mess. And I know. But Rick, everyone talks about the doomsday scenario. They said the same thing about, H1N1 and swine flu and all of them. They said about all of that, and it didn't happen. You're just being hyperbolic. This is different. It's already out of control. Those other ones, we somewhat had a control on. We were contact tracing the entire time. Now, not so much. And the sad reality is millions of people are going to struggle because of this. And our economy is going to struggle because of this. Anyway, got lots to get to today, lots to talk about. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Joe Walsh, former congressman and presidential candidate, is going to be here to share some thoughts on the big debate and much more. Right back after this. Then workers standing up and the union gives. After being trapped for 69 days, workers had been mining copper and gold 2,300 feet down at the San Jose mine near the northern city of Copiapo when the mine caved in early August. The company waited several hours to notify authorities, and rescue efforts only began 2 days later. Trapped miners initially tried to escape through ventilation shafts, but found the required ladders missing. Each route they attempted was blocked by fallen rock or threatened additional collapse. A state-owned mining company took over the rescue efforts, and soon they began. As geologist Serena Sorensen noted, prospecting for people. Initial exploratory boreholes failed to locate miners because mine shaft maps had never been updated. Rescuers had no idea whether miners were even still alive. Finally, 17 days later, the 8th borehole reached them. The miners tapped on the drill and taped notes to it, alerting rescuers above that they were indeed alive and well. Food, medicine, and other supplies were lowered down to them as rescue efforts intensified. Mini cameras were also lowered down, and miners videotaped messages of their continued ordeal. They told how they continued to search for possible escape routes and agreed to ration their limited food supplies so they could all survive. The first of 3 drilling plans to free the miners began. It was an international effort. The Chilean Navy consulted with NASA to design and construct the rescue pods. Throughout the entire process, rescuers worked to prevent additional cave-ins and rock falls. Finally, the extraction process began, and in less than 48 hours, all miners emerged as heroes.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, if you listen to Donald Trump in the final debate, you'd think everything was great. Just peachy, everything's great. The economy is just great. Never mind those millions of people who are unemployed. Never mind the millions of people who are uninsured, even though he was out there heavily touting the employer-based healthcare system that they love to keep throwing. Everyone loves their employer-based healthcare. Never mind them. And never mind the fact that things aren't great. Never mind the fact that older workers are facing unemployment at a much higher rate than younger workers for the first time since they've been keeping records. We also find out that women are unemployed at a higher level than men for the first time since, I guess the early to mid 1960s. Something definitely amiss in here to share some thoughts on where we are with the economy and where things are going. I've asked Diana Bosch to come talk with us. She's a policy analyst with the Women's Initiative at the Center for American Progress. Diana, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, did you happen to see the big debate?
I did, yes.
And everything's great, isn't it?
So, according to Trump, yes.
Before we get into all this stuff, did you see anything in that moment where Donald Trump looked at women and said, you know what, you're going to be okay?
Yeah, I saw Donald Trump lying. I saw him just blatantly ignoring the facts and the economic statistics about how this country is doing right now. We're in the midst of one of the biggest recessions in our history, and in fact, the worst recession ever for women. So I think, the facts are out there, and this is not a great situation for women, and we need to be paying attention to that.
Now, you guys have a piece out. The shambolic response to the public health and economic crisis has women on the brink as job recovery stalls. Why are women in this economy being hit harder than they were in past economies? I know, like in the past, like in the Bush collapse of 2008, women saw a lower unemployment rate than men because, a lot of the jobs that women were doing at the time were were much more needed, I guess, taking care of our elderly, service jobs that have to be done. Why is this different?
That's a great question, and it's actually because this is the first recession where service sector jobs in restaurants and at shopping, clothing stores are the jobs that we've actually lost. Previous recessions have been production, manufacturing jobs are the first to go. And because of the nature of the coronavirus, we can't be in person. We can't be in person indoors gathering. Service sector jobs have been the hardest hit. And the majority of people who perform service sector jobs are women. And so that's why you're seeing, for the first time ever, since the Bureau of Labor Statistics started gathering data on women in 1963, this is the first time that we've ever seen women lose more jobs than men. And
could that give us some insight into why another stimulus plan hasn't come around? I mean, it's curious to me, and maybe you've got some insight that I don't have. It's curious to me that when the Democrats are telling Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, or more, I should go Mitch McConnell, saying, here, take anything you want. We're going to give you basically a blank check to prop up the economy so that you look good for the election. It's curious to me that they haven't taken it. Could it be that maybe, I don't know, but that it would benefit women more than men?
I can't speak for them. I don't know why something hasn't been done. Since a lot of the early relief packages in the spring, a lot of those benefits expired over the summer, and workers and their families are the ones suffering. I know there have been some negotiations that have been attempted in Congress, and I'm not sure the reason that they haven't, been able to pass something. But in the meantime, women are the ones suffering. They're the ones who've yet to gain jobs back. I mean, since before the recession, there are still 5.8 million fewer women who are employed. They are still bearing the burden of caregiving with children at home. And so they need those relief packages. They need unemployment benefits and stimulus and food stamps and everything else. And so it's actually a shame, really, to see that there's not been significant action from the Trump administration or Republicans in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and the caregiving aspect of things is something that I've talked about for years. That we need to have a way to address our needs. We need someone to care for our elderly. We need someone to care for our children. And this pandemic has just highlighted the fact that we've failed all along, and that we're in a crisis moment, and it's now falling again onto those who can least shoulder the burden.
You're totally right. And I mean, before the pandemic, we were asking women to juggle both work and caregiving. Women have always taken care of their families. They've done the majority of childcare, of housework. And we were asking them before the pandemic to make it work, find the balance, right, without providing any sort of paid sick days or paid family and medical leave or affordable childcare. And then the pandemic hit and everything fell down because we didn't have the policies in place from the beginning to actually support women and to support people with family caregiving responsibilities.
Yeah, but
so that's what we need now.
No, you're right. But what do you say to the person who goes, "Come on, Diana, the jobs you're talking about, those low wage service sector jobs, those are always going to be vulnerable. We're not talking about the high skilled, high training, high education attained kind of jobs. They were able to do better, right?"
In some aspects, potentially, yes, they could have transitioned to work from home. But what about that grocery store clerk? That job is essential, and low-wage work can be essential work, and we should reward it, and we should protect those workers. In fact, millions of workers across the country didn't have access to a single paid sick day before the pandemic hit. And we want those people to be serving us food and helping us at the grocery store. We need to be actually protecting those workers and valuing the work that they do by paying them a living wage and providing them the workplace protections and benefits that every worker deserves, especially those doing essential work.
Yeah, this is where me as a labor guy says that every person who lived through this pandemic and had to show up to work, as you've pointed out, without a paid sick day, without any ability to have any say in your workplace, in the environment and the safety conditions that you endured, this is the moment where I would hope, and I'm still hopeful, we're going to see a mass of organizing of people demanding a voice on the job and pushing to unionize. Because at the end of the day, unions are about wages, hours, conditions. The heavy part of it being conditions. And sadly, as we've been talking about in this show for months, the conditions in many workplaces are deplorable.
Yes, definitely. And unions can go a long way to helping fix that problem, exactly as you said. But conditions are deplorable. Workers don't have the protective equipment they need. Employers can fire them if they don't show up to work when they're sick. We absolutely need unions, and we need policies that step in and actually give workers the protection that they deserve.
Yeah, you hit an important part there. If you don't show up to work, you get fired. And I heard Lindsey Graham and I heard all of the Republicans whining and complaining, well, we're giving an extra $600 a week to people who are unemployed. That means they're not going to go back to work. It either shows, one, that they're completely ignorant of how our system works, that if you refuse to go to work, you don't get to collect unemployment, or more likely, in my view, they know exactly how it works, is that this was just the punchline that they were using, the deception that they were using to convince other people that someone's getting something that they're not.
Yeah, you're totally right. There's lots of economic research out there that said that people, even if they were getting that $600 a week, it didn't disincentivize them from working. People want to go to work. They want to find meaning in their work. They want to provide for their families. I think work is valuable, but we need to actually pay people well enough and make sure that they're safe in the workplace, and not, tout these lies that people just want to stay home.
Yeah. Also, you guys write in your article, basically what we already know of, obviously women being heavily affected by this, but not all women equally. That there is a disproportionate number of women of color who are impacted by this at a much greater rate. The vulnerable seem to always be much more vulnerable in these moments. Can you talk a bit about that? What your research found there?
Yeah, absolutely. We know that, in fact, women of color are on the front lines of this pandemic. They are doing the essential work, and they're also often segregated into low-wage jobs, not by choice, but that's where they've been able to find work. And those are the jobs that, they've lost employment since the pandemic began. There was actually a spike of unemployment right in April at the start of the pandemic, which was the worst month ever recorded for labor statistics. And Hispanic women had an unemployment rate of 20%. Black women and Hispanic women, even still in September, the last month that we have data for, they have an unemployment rate of 11%. That's 1 in 10 women who don't have a job but want one. And so we really need to think about the women of color who are doing this essential work and who are also the breadwinners for their family, right? They provide their family's financial security, and they don't have a job. And so we need to make sure that we're thinking about those women and ensuring that the policies are going to help them first.
Well, according to Donald Trump, he's been the best president for African Americans. Since Abe Lincoln, as Joe Biden backhanded him with Abe Lincoln over there.
Yeah, I don't believe that, and it's a pretty outrageous claim.
And that's not the only one. I mean, that's probably the least of the outrageous claims. But here's the weird thing, and the reason I bring Trump back into this is, he makes all of these claims that there's never been a better president for blacks. There's never been a better president for women. There's never been a better president for anything, even though he's going to be the first president, well, at least in my lifetime, to leave office having a net loss of jobs. This pandemic was bad. It's horrible. But he was on the path of bad all along anyway. And one of the things as a labor guy that I look at was his destruction of Obama's overtime rule that could have raised the wages of a lot of people, by millions of people for the work that they do, just by changing how we give employers the ability to consider workers salary exempt. And he destroyed part of what Obama did, and millions of women got left behind.
I am so grateful you brought that up. It's absolutely right. The Trump administration has hurt women left and right, and even before the pandemic started. This overtime rule that you mentioned, the Trump administration rescinded an overtime rule from the Obama administration that would have said anyone making under about $47,000 per year would have been eligible for overtime. The Trump administration rescinded that and lowered the threshold only to about $35,000. And they didn't tie it to inflation. And so it just is going to be stagnant for the future rather than increasing every year as costs and prices increase. And so that's just one way in which the Trump administration has really taken money out of the pockets of women and their families. He's also rolled back equal pay protection laws. It's just left and right. He's really not helped women.
Yeah, no, I mean, I look at this, and again, we see all of the train wreck in front of us. We see the edict by tweet. We see all of this chaos that's going around. But underneath, and this is where I keep telling the people, look behind the curtain. The Trump show is one thing. There's a lot of crazy there. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of distraction and diversion. The sad reality is the people that he's put into regulatory positions, the people that he's headed up his different cabinet positions, they are doing really, really destructive work. And you bring up the EEOC by ending the data collection on equal pay. That is a huge, I think, a huge harm to women in just knowing that they're getting cheated.
Absolutely. I mean, we know that the ratio of women's earnings to men has not changed for years. It's stayed around. Women earn about 82 cents on the dollar for every dollar a man earns. And that's just, part of that is just discrimination. But we don't actually have the data or the information. And what we were trying to do, or what the EEOC was trying to do by gathering data on equal pay, was really to try and understand the problem so we can address it and ensure that women are paid fairly. But Trump decided that data was too onerous for businesses, unfortunately, and just rolled the rule back and has fought it in court.
Yeah, see, I can fix that problem. Again, I go back to, I'm a labor guy. I can fix that problem. I got a book on my desk. It's the contract that I have for my last place of employment. It lays out every aspect of my employment. Wages, hours, conditions, everything, grievance procedure, everything. It is completely transparent. There's no, hey, is that guy making more or less than I am? Or is that woman getting cheated? There's none of that. It's complete and open transparency. And for me, again, I go back to the role that unions play in our society of opening things up and making them completely transparent. To me, that's a beginning on how we solve this problem.
Absolutely. Unions can ensure fair pay. They can ensure overtime. They can ensure safe workplaces. They really have an important bargaining seat at the table to make sure that workers are valued the way that they deserve to be.
But it just doesn't end with the economic parts of it. You guys had written a piece not too long ago that I caught. You're talking about sexual abuse on college campuses, the way I guess Title IX has been weakened. Also, Title X family planning stuff. I mean, he's really it's even not just about jobs, and it's really about grabbing her by what.
Right. The Trump administration wants to harm women in all areas of their life, taking away their reproductive rights, reducing their access to health care by trying to repeal the ACA. Every single way in both the court and in regulations, the Trump administration is trying to harm women. And it's really honestly disappointing, and I think it's actually taken women's equality and women's progress in both the workforce and at home just back by decades.
So let's pull this around, because we've got an election coming up very soon, and we've got all these problems are going to be there the day after the election. They're going to be here on January 20th at 12:01 p.m. When whoever the next president is, what's the path forward? How do we fix this?
That's a great question, and I think unfortunately we might be still dealing with the coronavirus at that point. So I would say the first and most important thing that we have to do is we have to contain and control the virus. There's no way that we can even begin to think about the economy and helping women recover and helping families until we actually ensure the safety of all Americans and especially workers. So that means we need to have testing and contact tracing. We need to ensure that people wear masks. We need to protect workers in the workplace by providing them personal protective equipment, paid sick days, and then supporting businesses. We need to ensure that schools and child care centers can reopen. And we need to ensure that workers can take care of their families. They have child care and paid family and medical leave. I think it's a big task. I'm hopeful for the future, but we really do need to begin by getting the coronavirus under control and then taking really strong action to protect workers and to ensure that they can care for themselves and their loved ones.
There you go. That's a big start. And for me, at this moment, though, we should be passing a stimulus through to ensure that anyone who has to stay home and help their kids get through school or take care of a loved one gets paid. There's so much that we need to be doing. But Diana, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Great work you guys are doing there at the Center for American Progress. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much.
Good stuff. Diana Bosch, policy analyst there with the Women's Initiative at the Center for American Progress. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. That was the day that the AFL-CIO convention convened in New York City. At the convention, John Sweeney was elected president of the Federation. It was the first contested election for president in AFL-CIO history. He ran with a slate of labor leaders, including Rich Trumka, who called themselves the New Voice Slate. Sweeney was president of the Service Employees International Union. He was a New Yorker born in the Bronx. He started his career in labor working for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, then moving to SEIU as a union rep. He represented SEIU Local 32B in New York City during 2 strikes of apartment maintenance workers during the 1970s. In 1980, he was elected president of the International SEIU, a post he held for 15 years. Membership in SEIU nearly doubled from 625,000 to 1.1 million under his leadership. Sweeney gave a powerful speech for his candidacy at the convention. He said, quote, "Workers look at their paychecks, the political system, and the public debate and wonder why nobody is speaking for me. Then, in fear and frustration, they look for leadership to the Rush Limbaughs who seek scapegoats rather than solutions for problems of stagnant wages, corporate greed, and a fractured society." He pledged that under his leadership, the AFL-CIO would move to commit more resources to organizing these workers. Promise. He instituted a new initiative, the Union Summer Program, to involve college students in the labor movement. He expanded organizing efforts in the South and Southwest. John Sweeney served 5 terms as president of the AFL-CIO. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, if you listen to last night's debate, the final debate, if you listen to what Trump was saying about PPE, evidently we're flush with personal protective equipment. We've got more ventilators, we've got more masks, more gowns. He even threw in goggles, which I don't think I've heard him talk about before, but evidently, according to Donald Trump, we've got all we're ever going to need. And as he said, we're supplying the world. Now, here's the thing. I seem to remember all during the first wave of the pandemic, we didn't have enough for everyone to go around. And I got to think that's why Anthony Fauci came out and said, maybe not right now, maybe not wear masks, because we did need to protect those people on the front line. We needed to protect healthcare workers. We needed to protect transit workers, the people who work at the supermarkets. And I don't think we did a great job of it. But I'll tell you, I'm thrilled to hear we've got all we're going to need, because we're heading towards another spike, another round of infections. And look, I'm hoping they are there. But here to share some thoughts on whether he believes we're there or not, I've asked Lance Lugenbaugh to come talking with us. Lance is the president and business agent at ATU Local 1001. Lance, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick.
So let's start with what the president said during the debate. He said that, we've got all this protective gear. We've got goggles now. We've got all this stuff we're sharing with the rest of the world. Is that your experience?
Well, no. We're here at our transit agency. If they have those quantities of masks, they're keeping them locked up in safes somewhere. We've fought from March, like you just mentioned early in this process. Our agency originally was discouraging people from wearing masks, and maybe that speaks to your point about trying to preserve them. But we had to go out and obtain our own masks. We went and purchased approximately 6,000 masks and went out and distributed them to our members. But as it stands right now, those were really the last large quantity of masks that was ever introduced into our system here. We're still waiting for a reasonable supply to be established. Our folks who have used masks throughout 20 and 30 years of the operation of this agency can't even get masks to do basic jobs like sanding and working on the buses and the transit vehicles. And then, of course, we want the most protective masks for our frontline bus operators and the service and cleaning folks who are exposed to this, potentially to this virus. And they're being given cloth masks and face shields. And we are still waiting for this plethora of the most protective masks, the N95s.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, Lance, and this is one of those things that I've been talking about for years on this program, first from a driver's safety, because we see all these horror stories of drivers being beat up on buses. It's always been curious to me why we don't partition them off. Why they don't have a safe space of their own, one, to stop attacks, but two, that you're not exposed to all of these viruses. Because, look, if you're a bus driver, you're exposed to, thousands of people a day and all of the germs that they're carrying with them outside a pandemic. But especially now in this moment, especially now that you look at this report coming out of New York, where a quarter of the transit employees in New York City were infected, and you had, a bunch of people die from this, you would think we would want to do something more.
Well, it would make sense. I mean, our operators have struggled through that for years. You get on a bus and close the door, and the air starts to circulate, and you're basically in a petri dish that's on wheels. And the original pushback that I got on masks was that, oh, well, they're not required unless you're around a sick person. And obviously, you're not only around a sick person, you're trapped with a sick person. And like you say, this is not just an ordinary sickness. This is a lethal condition that, so yeah, it makes no sense at all. We've tried to push for the mask enforcement for passengers on the bus, because we can all protect ourselves. But once one person gets on the bus who is not protecting themselves, then they contaminate the entire vehicle, and we're no longer delivering passengers were delivering the virus.
Excellent point. Now, the CDC has updated their their information to now say that anyone on planes, on ships, on ferries, on trains, subways, any mode of public transportation should be wearing a mask. Is there a way to enforce that? I mean, because I look at my local grocery store, you walk in, there's a girl sitting there going, would you like a mask? It's mandatory to wear a mask to come into our store, but people just blow by her anyway, and they don't do anything to stop it. Is there a way to enforce this stuff?
Well, that's always complicated because then you get into civil rights discussions and those sort of things. And then we also have, in the transit industry, there's people who learn the key words. And so the key words here in Denver, Colorado are, I have a medical condition. And that the law that, or the process, what the governor declared makes an exception for someone. Everybody has to wear a mask unless, and so people learn those keywords. But even without keywords, trying to enforce this, it becomes another police state kind of a concern. And how do you, physically or in other ways enforce a mask policy? But it comes back to at least establishing and making the effort. There's always going to be a few people who drive faster than they should on the highway, but primarily the laws and the enforcement just reduces the amount of folks who do that.
No, it's one of those moments where you go, I wish we didn't have to talk about enforcement. I wish we didn't have to talk about how do you make people practice common sense? How do you make people care about the person sitting next to them or the person driving the bus? It's just one of those things that it infuriates me because, as I've explained to people in the past, when they mock me for wearing a mask in a certain place, I say, I'm not wearing it for me. I'm wearing it to protect you because you don't know where I've been.
Well, and that's the thing, these cloth masks, they protect everyone from you. And like you say, you are showing your respect for them by wearing a mask and protecting them. And, a certain amount of basic decency would hopefully have everyone reciprocate. But unfortunately, that's not the case.
Yeah. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Lance Logenbaugh. He's the president and business agent at ATU, the Amalgamated Transit Union, Local 1001. We heard a lot during the pandemic when things were shut down about how important people were, how important your members are, how important the person working at the grocery store, the people working in hospitals. We assign them essential worker titles. We call them essential heroes. And we do this during times of crisis. We put people on pedestals and we throw the hero word at them. But when it comes time to actually taking care of them, protecting them, paying them, we don't seem to do a very good job of this. And every time we do this, 9/11 being one of those moments where we threw the hero word out a lot. But when it comes to taking care of them, we really always fall short. And I always ask, who's going to be the next hero to step forward given our record? And I look at this and I go, ask you, how have we done so far in this? Because, again, we threw that hero word out, but I don't know that we did a really good job in protecting those people and helping them while the rest of us were trying to stay safe.
Well, one of the frustrations for me personally is that while we were making that proclamation of all these heroes, it's like Animal Farm. Some heroes were more heroic than others. And so our folks have not been given the same attention at every level. The need for the masks, obviously, the medical personnel, you can easily say, yeah, they need masks. But a medical personnel, they go into a situation with a little more preparation, a little more ability to control the situation. Bus operator sits there and he's a dartboard waiting for someone with a dart to walk onto his bus. And yet we were unable to get, I reached out to the governor, to the transportation folks to try and get a prioritization for our people to be able to get the masks. And that's just on the protection side of it. Then if you look at, okay, if somebody really is a hero, then they're putting their life on the line. Let's recognize that by giving them some compensation in the form of what we're paying them to go out there and risk their life. These folks, they showed up for work day after day. They were all scared. They were all terrified, but they showed up for work. They did their job. They moved people around the city, and they got the title of hero, but that basically was about it. That all I ever saw.
Yeah, we usually throw around platitudes really easily, but when it comes to throwing the pennies around, we don't even do that. So are you talking about some kind of a hazard pay, which I was advocating during the time? Because look, if you got laid off and you were sitting at home, you got to collect unemployment plus $600. I was saying that if you're showing up to work, working for minimum wage at the grocery store, we should be kicking you that $600 too to help your family during this time. Because not only are you exposing yourself, you're going home and exposing everybody else too.
Yeah, it's not it's not an unreasonable request, and it's also not something that is a new idea. Hazard pay is a well-established thing that we do for people who encounter hazards.
Yeah, I'm fixated on this hero title because we were throwing it around a lot during those months, and everyone's thank goodness for our frontline heroes. But here's the problem now. Those people that we were calling frontline heroes, not only did we cheat out of a hazard pay, we're now talking about them being on the chopping block and end up losing their jobs. And I know transit systems across the country who, again, people were, thank goodness you're here because we're getting our frontline people to their jobs. Now we're talking about massive layoffs in transit systems across the country, which I think is absolutely the wrong thing to be doing in this moment. We should be expanding transit so we don't have to cram so many people into these buses and trains so that we can get people back and forth to work. I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you guys are facing.
Well, so, you part of what you're saying, I'll talk about first, and that is that the number of people that we can fit into our modes of transportation. The whole system is changing. We don't want to be the buggy factory admiring all the shiny new automobiles rolling down the street. We want to be able to say, look, here's what we're doing to move ahead. What is our service going to look like? How are we going to provide service? And how are we going to pay for it? Because if a bus can only carry half the people that it's normally that it's designed to carry right now, then we need more buses, and then that means we need more people. And so there's a new model, and there's of what the transportation will be, and there's a new model for how the transportation will get paid for. Now, when you talk about the loss of jobs, at certain levels, when the dollars and cents leave you no other choice, then that's where you find yourself. Here in Denver right now, unfortunately, we have virtually a company that has decided that they likening to declaring bankruptcy and going to the bankruptcy court with hundreds of millions of dollars in a bank account, saying, oh yeah, but you know what, I don't think I really want to spend that right now. Well, they're talking about laying off hundreds of transportation workers while they still have money in the bank. And their need to do that even without money in the bank is based on faulty financial projections and optional. They have good, better, and best options. Right now they're taking good. If they even took better, that would reduce the number of people they have to lay off. There's options. And the biggest concern of this is not only on the human side. These folks here in Denver, Colorado, have worked 6 days a week for years. They were the backbone of fulfilling the district's mission to provide transportation. And so we ruined their lives for 5 and 6 years. And now we've come to the time where, things are a little tough, and, it looks like we're just going to have to kick you to the curb. So we're going to ruin their life again. But, it's not just the end of those jobs. it's potentially the end of this current transportation industry. And with that, it's the crippling of the local economic recovery, because without public transportation, there are people who are wanting to get around. There are people who are wanting to ride. But coming back to what our service looks like, if they get on a bus and there's too many people on the bus and the buses don't look like there's anything different, they're going to say, yeah, no, thanks. I'll figure something out. And, you know, when they do figure something else out, they're not coming back just because we go, okay, we're ready for you now. And so it's concerning for me to see the loss of jobs, but to me, it's also potentially a catastrophic effect on our local economy here.
And in the last minute, we've got, you know, I know there's a lot of people are saying we need to advocate for passage of the HERO Act, which I'm advocating for as well. If you're advising Joe Biden, how do we help transit? How do we help your members? How do we help the communities that your members operate in to stay safe and still provide the services that you guys do?
Pass the HEROES Act, and then let's look at transportation funding, because that has been a ever decreasing item on the budgets for the last number of years. Fund transportation. You know, that's the number one thing that's going to help our fighting of the climate effects. Fund transportation, pay our heroes.
It sounds sane and rational to me, Lance. I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Good stuff, Lance Lugenbach. You know, here's the thing. You know, and I go back to this. You know, pass the HERO Act, absolutely, but we've got to be more proactive in how we protect our workers, not just transit workers, but all workers. And if Trump really is, if he's right, and we have all this PPE, we should be getting it to people now before the next spike happens. Also, we should be taking care of all those people who do show up when the next spike happens, who make sure that we get food and make sure that we get the things that we need while we're trying to protect ourselves. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1989. At 1:05 in the afternoon, a massive explosion rocked the town of Pasadena, Texas, near Houston. The explosion was so large it registered a 3.5 on the Richter scale. The disaster took place at the Phillips Petroleum Company's Houston Chemical Complex. The Pasadena facility produces plastics. The fire started when highly flammable gas was released from an improperly connected valve. 23 workers were killed. More than 300 more were injured. The Houston Chronicle described the devastating impact of the explosion, writing, "Entire buildings vanished as a huge black smoke plume billowed skyward in an almost apocalyptic vision. Homes as far as 8 miles away were damaged." After the explosion, the company rebuilt its facilities. A year after the disaster, Tom Gentry, president of the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Local 4-227, thought the company could do more to improve workplace safety. He told a Chronicle reporter, "The company still uses outside contractors with less safety training, and workers become tired because of bare-bones staffing." At the time of the explosion, there were 905 company workers and an additional 600 contracted employees who worked at the facilities. OSHA found multiple safety violations. The company eventually came to an agreement with OSHA and paid a $4 million fine. In 1999, another explosion killed 2 workers at the Pasadena facility. The next year, yet another explosion killed 1 worker and injured 71. The company continued to hire contracted employees. After the third explosion in 11 years, Joe Campbell, secretary-treasurer of the paper Allied Industrial, Chemical, and Energy Workers International, said the company continued to hire contractors who have little or no experience working in a volatile workplace.
Sometimes I don't know whether to weep uncontrollably, laugh hysterically, or just throw up. I recently did all three when I saw another gusher of greed pouring out of corporate America. This one is especially nauseating, given today's raging health crisis, for the culprits are major healthcare corporations. One perpetrator is Larry Merlo, CEO of our country's largest drugstore chain, CVS. In this time of COVID-19, customers are surging into the chain's 10,000 stores for everything from medications to masks. Yet, the boss has blithely left many of the pharmacies so severely understaffed that they pose a danger to public health. CVS pharmacists tell of frantically scrambling to keep up with filling prescriptions, answering ever-ringing phone inquiries, giving shots and COVID tests, stocking toilet paper, tending the drive-thru, etc., while also having to meet ceaseless corporate demands for cost-cutting and more profit. The result has been a dangerous work overload, with many pharmacists handling nearly 200 prescriptions in a 6-hour shift, about one every 2 minutes. Unsurprisingly, there's been an alarming rise in serious errors and week-long delays in providing critical medications for customers. Adding to the exasperation of local managers, who are allowed no say in staffing, is the infuriating level of heedless greed at the top. The New York Times reports that while CEO Merlo has failed to fund the staff his pharmacies need, he has generously funded his own needs. He paid himself $36.5 million last year alone. Then there's the mountain of interest payments and fees that CVS is paying to Wall Street bankers and lawyers who engineered Merlo's takeover of the Aetna health insurance giant last year. This is Jim Hightower saying, so while you're being underserved at a local CVS, just remember that boss man Merlo and his merger mercenaries are making a killing.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the final debate over. And I'll tell you, I went into it expecting the chaos that we saw in the first debate. And as I said earlier, the mute button worked. The mute button, I think, did what it was supposed to do. But sadly, the numbers down. Ratings down a little bit. And I got to wonder what that says about we, the viewing populace. Maybe we just want peace and quiet for a little bit. Anyway, here share some thoughts on the fallout from the big debate. Share some thoughts on the winners, the losers, and maybe where this goes from now to Election Day. I've asked our good friend Scott Dworkin to come back and share some thoughts. He is the co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also host of the Dworkin Report. Scott, thanks for taking time for us.
What's up, Rick? How are you?
I'm good. So thoughts on the debate last night?
I think it was landslide win for Biden, and I think that Trump did awful. But just because he kept his pants up and didn't start screaming, doesn't mean that he did well.
Right.
He presented no policy for anything, no specifics about anything. He couldn't speak directly to the American people. He could only sort of look at the camera, but there was no genuine nature. There was no real empathy for anything any problems that he's created or caused, or no general empathy for the families that have lost their loved ones. He downplayed the virus. He pathologically lied the entire time. He lied this time more because he had more opportunity to speak and less interruptions. It just was, for all his debates, it may have been his best debate that he's ever done, but that's still one of the worst debates that anyone's ever done. The performance that he had was still one of the worst that's ever existed.
Personally, I think this was by far the worst debate he's ever done because he didn't interrupt, because it exposed how little he knows. The fact is he's about an inch deep when it comes to policy. So it exposed how little he knows after being president for this amount of time, and how no policy is there at all. So there was a point during the debate where I'm like, Donald, you're getting your butt kicked. It's time to start interrupting. You better figure out how to knock Joe off his statement, because truthfully, Biden came out very comfortably, hammered him on point after point after point. And I'll tell you, my favorite moment was when Biden looked at him and goes, Abraham Lincoln over here. I just thought that was terrific, and the fact that Trump didn't get that it was a backhanded compliment was even more. That he wanted an explanation was even more spot.
Right, and then he couldn't remember why he brought up Abraham Lincoln. Like, he had to get reminded by Biden. He was trying to be crass, but then I think he couldn't actually remember. So the one thing that, you know, caught him off guard, that I'm not sure if it's ever really happened to him before, and you could tell he was on the ropes then because he was getting like defensive and, well, I don't know, is when, you know, Biden sat there and he said, well, I shouldn't do it. And then he goes straight in and he's like, you know, they've got Russian disinformation. They're Russian pawns that they're spreading these falsehoods to interfere in our elections. You know, these national security officials have said so. And, you know, I think when he went on like, Trump had no defense. He had no presentation for this whole laptop thing. And I think Kristen Welker did a great job shutting down any conspiracy theories so that he couldn't spread them during the debate. But it goes to show that, you know, I guess it's good for Biden to have this experience, because I don't know how many people could be that well-tempered with their family being attacked in this kind of grotesque way.
Yeah.
So it's again, I think that, you know, he failed at his mission. He wanted to have some kind of moment last night, and all he did was, you could see Biden was prepared and he looked presidential, and then you saw Trump just try and, you know, get out of it without having to walk out of the room like he did in the 60 Minutes interview. So it just was, it was par for the course, but it was worse than I expected. And but again, I still think, because he formulated like some full sentences, it was his best debate. But it's still.
Did he really formulate full sentences?
There were some there when he denies things, he'll speak, and yeah, that's the only time he really gives like full. Well, you know, I just don't know these people. I don't know any of these people. Like he does the same thing for everything, and I think he had no response to the having a Chinese bank account. He was like surprised it was brought up, or maybe that was the whole ploy. But he definitely was not prepared. I think he regrets not preparing more for this. And a few hours would not work. Biden, you know, is doing it on the campaign trail and around the clock, and probably being lambasted by everyone, maybe even professionals like comedians and things like that, to taunt him while he's on stage and do things like that maybe Trump would do. So he was prepared on every level, and Trump was not prepared for this presidential Biden to come out just basically laying smackdown on him, being like, this is, you know, you failed this virus response and you're responsible for this, and you have the death of these people on your hands, and it was under your watch. And you know, I think it was kind of cathartic for the American people, but as you had mentioned, you know, not as many people watch. And I think maybe because of the last debate, they saw that and they were like, I'm done. My vote is decided. But, you know, again, I think that people also are a little bit tired. Let me remind you that this is when we hit the gas pedal all the way. Like, this is when everything needs to be amplified 24/7, you know, Biden, Harris, Democratic ticket all the way down, vote, 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 and then volunteer and repeat. So
and repeat. But here's the thing.
But volunteer.
There was that
repeat.
first
voting.
2 minutes.
Only vote once.
Yeah, of course.
Only vote once. Don't listen to this dude about voting more. Anyways.
Unless you want free room and board.
I guess you could call it that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, the Gray Bar hotels always got vacancies.
Right.
But the first 2 minutes that Biden spoke, I got to tell you, I didn't listen to much of what Joe Biden had to say. I was reveling in the fact that I wasn't going to hear Donald Trump for 2 minutes.
Hey, the mute button. Thank you. It was just so fantastic. And, you know, I was waiting for him to have a point where he tried to talk into it, but he never really had that. So it was interesting that he kind of listened to the rules and he did not try and push it too much. But it did make it so that he couldn't do his, I don't know what you call it, but he couldn't basically heckle Biden from the sidelines. And that's all it will be, is Biden giving a presentation to the people in America, and Trump just basically screaming at him the entire time. So this time he couldn't do it in the same way. And also everybody around him told him constantly, you cannot go full crazy tonight. Like, you have to be the most sane and calm that you've ever been. And you cannot have any explosions. You can't. And of course he still did. He still looked ridiculous. He still looked pathetic, and definitely shady. And this whole talk about, I've found him working in dozens of countries throughout the world, and also his 3 kids, his 3 oldest kids as well.
Right.
And they're in shady places, right? So like, he starts talking about, oh, he's got a Chinese bank account. Okay, we found that out. Now he's got a fund in India, and then so he's got money spread throughout the world. So then you look at, like, okay, did he pay any taxes on those? Or like, was he evading taxes, or what? Like, how does this work? I'm sure it's set up in a way where rich people set it up where they can evade taxes legally of some sort, like, but it's like shell companies or something like that. But it's just not right, and it's shady, and we can't have anyone that can be manipulated by money.
Right.
And I think that's the key thing here is, if you're a politician, money cannot be your motivating factor, and you can't make quote unquote deals involving personal money and personal wealth included in any of that. And I think we have to go back to a zero tolerance corruption kind of policy in DC and across the country, because it's killing people.
No, I'm right there with you. But here's the thing: we shouldn't just be now finding out that because he hasn't detached himself from his companies, that him and his companies are on the hook for almost, what is it?
$1 billion.
Almost $1 billion over the next couple of years. Why are we just now finding this out? We find out now that he had bank accounts in China and he was paying taxes in China. We're just finding that out now. He didn't pay taxes here. Again, this is one of those things where our media hasn't done their job, and we as voters haven't done our job. We should have demanded the tax returns in 2016, and he should have never been allowed near the office without us knowing where his faults and his liabilities and where his pressure points are. I hope that's what's coming out of this.
Yeah, and I think transparency, like, this is going to cause a peaceful revolution that's going to ripple for decades in regards to transparency and flushing out corruption here. It really, they went ahead and took advantage of every angle they possibly could, and they're exploiting everything that they possibly can, and people are dying and they don't care. And so I don't know what their thinking is, but they're going to lose power. And when they do, we are going to not, like I've told you before, we have a list of the crimes that they've committed, and it's not retaliatory. It is justice. And we will make sure that criminals are prosecuted for the crimes that they committed while they're in the White House.
Right. So you've got a list of all these crimes, and the Mueller report is a good first start. But you look at what the deputy to former special counsel Robert Mueller said on CNN today. He says he strongly believes that Trump's going to pardon himself and everybody else along with him when they lose.
Great. Well, then they can face state crimes as well. I don't think that it's not going to be that simple. You can't commit these many crimes and then think you're going to get away with it just because you were the president. And definitely because you surrounded him. The second he leaves the White House, a lot of their protections are gone. And there's going to be crimes that the biggest crimes are the ones that we don't know about. Right. There's no doubt in my mind that what it is, and we will find out. And it always leaks out. And that information always will come forward. And there will be a kind of reckoning, I guess, in this country where people, the smoke clears, and we're able to actually absorb the fact that over 240,000, close to 250,000 people have died because of negligence and stupidity at the highest levels of our government. And I think when we are able to accept that fact, that we were conned by him, we were conned by Russia, we were fooled as voters, and we let ourselves be manipulated because we did not control our own path. And I think that this entire game is changed. And I think this election, if everybody were able to vote and it was fair, they'd be voted out of office in Idaho. Like but that's not how it works. So
Right.
we incrementally, we won the House in 2018. We won in Alabama statewide. We won the special election, Connor Lamb. We won other special elections across the country. We've got great momentum going with us. I've seen this same kind of build as it was before. I've seen people, Democrats win back the House and Senate. I've seen Republicans win back the House and Senate and the White House. Like it comes in waves. And when our wave comes here, what we cannot forget is everything. We need to overhaul everything and use this as an opportunity to not go back to where things were.
Right.
We need to go where things should be. And so we have an opportunity here to make a lot of change because they made so many radical, terrible changes. We can push the envelope on where it was before to the next level on everything. So that's going to be the progressive rubber band, and that's going to be the what they regret most is pushing so hard and not making deals and not coming to the middle of the road, because we will respond very full force in the other way.
Do you really think that to be true? I mean, you've got Biden running on the unity idea. We're going to bring the country back together. There was the story this week that they're vetting some Republicans like John Kasich and Jeff Flake and Christy Todd Whitman. There were a bunch of names. The congressman here, Charlie Dent from Pennsylvania, as possible cabinet people. Do you really believe that Biden's going to go after Trump? Do you think that they're going to get into that kind of divisiveness? Because my belief, my fear is that you go, no, we're going to put all that. It's done. We've got to move forward. Like other administrations have done, like Obama did with Wall Street. We didn't do the perp walks that I was hoping for. We didn't have the mass incarcerations like we should have with all those criminals on Wall Street. And I fear we don't do it with Trump because we say we don't want to be that kind of a country that goes after political leaders. What do you say to that? Because look, I look at today. You had 745 economists come out and say that Trump doesn't deserve re-election because he's made the country unrecognizable. Our problems are so many that who knows how long it's going to take to clean this stuff up. Can we do all of these things at once and still do the things that you say about putting these criminals in jail, where I think most of us want them?
And some of the things we cannot fix without flushing out the corruption. Without figuring out how things went wrong, crimes that were committed or things that weren't crimes that need to be crimes, without overhauling that, history will repeat itself. And so we need to make examples out of people where it's shown that if you interfere in our election, if you work with a foreign power and interfere in our elections, there are stark consequences for that. You are undermining entire democracy here, and people die due to that. Because all of a sudden we have different representation that does not represent the actual people. And then you pass laws that don't reflect the actual people in your state or your district, or you cheat to win, or you bend the rules a little bit, and you break some more laws, and you keep on pushing the envelope on that. I think the corruption is so widespread that there needs to be a shock and awe kind of response where people do get arrested for the crimes that they have not charged or they skipped over or they tried to bury under the rug. This is a different time. And people are dead because of them in many different ways. Not just the kids in cages and the people that they separated from their families, and the people who have died in detention facilities. Not just that. Not just people because of COVID, the hundreds of thousands of people. There's a lot other people. I don't know how many it would be, but people who have been denied access to this country that have died because of it. Because they were trying to flee their country, and because you shut down immigration and other things or deported them, they're dead. And so there's a real opportunity again to figure out, okay, what did he do, and what are all the crimes that have been committed, and how can we remedy everything? And then at the same time, how can we hold them accountable? And you know, it's going to be sort of like a 9/11 commission. You know, we're going to have to root out how many companies were linked to Mnuchin and Trump and everybody else with the PPP money. Like, there's a lot of money flying around what they had complete control over. And I mean, I know Republican consulting firms that got hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that's just like insane. Like, you don't need that. That's not what it's meant for. I know you might have employee, but like, that's not what it was intended for. It was intended for real business people.
Right. Dude, the Ayn Rand Institute got PPP money.
Right.
The freaking Ayn Rand Institute. Think
It
about
just-
that for a second.
Oh yeah.
Let that sink in. The people who tell you that government is bad, they hate government, there's not a government program that's any good, took government money.
It's just it's so widespread that you can't move on from it. You have to open up the wound, and you have to go in there and see what happened during his presidency. What were these meetings that he everything needs to be answered. And what the fun part is the people that Biden hires is people like me. And so the campaign can say that they're vetting whoever they'd like, because it's just vetting people. It's not hiring anybody. And I think it's very smart for people to be reminded of the fact that John Kasich is supporting Biden. And Biden considering him for a cabinet position probably sounds really good in Ohio right now, is my guess. So as an Ohioan, I would say that would, if I were like a Republican, I would assume that, that kind of makes it okay to vote for Biden. Oh, he might have him in the administration. But again, it's the people that are working underneath them. There's not going to be a Stephen Miller. There's not going to be a Jared or Ivanka, right? There's going to be people like Karine Jean-Pierre, and real human beings that love people and care about people and want to do the best, and not about like how I could get more money for myself or more money for my boss, or I get him credit, or I can cover up this kind of scandal. So that overhaul, that whole sweep of people coming in, former Obama staffers, people who worked for a legitimate president, that's going to be it's going to be huge. And so no, we can't move on, because it's kind of like, oh, okay, we'll take the car from here, and then we hit the gas pedal and the wheels fall off. And it's like, oh, okay, what do we do now? We have to go back, we have to look at what's wrong with the car, and we have to go through the repairs. Like, we have to assess, what did he do? When did he do it? How extensive were the crimes and corruption? Who needs to be prosecuted? How swiftly can we move with everything? How clear as day is everything? And then in the broad strokes of everything, how can we move quickly to make sure that it never, ever happens again? And that's what we need to focus on. That must be one of the first initiatives, because in order to protect our country, we're going to have to actually move to protect our elections.
Right.
And so that's because again, if we protect our elections in every way possible, including social media and everywhere else, then we're not going to have a foreign country try and coerce people as if they're different racial ethnicities or background in a certain area, and they try and entice people or get competing rallies against each other across the street from each other. Like, that's warfare. And like, I don't know if people accept the fact that what happens online actually affects real life. But now that people are spending a lot of time at home, I hope they realize the effect of the internet. And we just need to accept the fact that the internet is powerful. It's much more powerful than we take it for. We all take it for granted, and we just need to recognize that we are being manipulated, or at least attempted to be, and we just need to stay aware and just be on top of it, and not just go with the flow with anybody, no matter who it is. When Biden wins, that's great. Who's going to be the first person out there saying, we need to do X, Y, and Z? Well, let's see. No, we need to move now. We need to move now, and progressive. Like, it's not going to be like high five, like, all right, go team. No. Like, we need to go in and we need to clean this mess up, and at the same time use the opportunity to move as progressive as we can possibly, with everything, with every policy, to help as many people as possible, to save as many people as possible, because that is what the scramble is going to be, to save lives. And there's simple things that we'll be able to do for that, but that's going to be the first kind of steps if he were to win. If Trump wins re-election, just think about that and remember to vote and tell everybody that you know to vote, because that's the thing that I want to drive home, is that Trump can win. Do not let him win. Go vote and volunteer.
There you go. But here's the thing, and I hope you're right. I hope that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. But what we do know is that whoever is president on January 20th, whoever takes the reins that afternoon, is going to inherit a mess. We've still got the virus that's going to be raging, because today the largest number of new infections in a single day that we've had since the beginning of all this. It's only going to get worse. The University of Washington said expect another 300,000 people to be dead between now and the end of February. There's all this bad news. The economy, millions of people have lost jobs. Millions of people have lost their health care. Amy Coney Barrett is going to be on the Supreme Court and going to toss out the Affordable Care Act. So we're going to have 20 plus million people uninsured. There are all of these problems. Infrastructure, the economy tanking. There's going to be all of this stuff. And my fear is what you just laid out doesn't happen, because everything else has to take priority. And these criminals get away again. But that's just my thoughts. Last line of questioning I wanted to get in with you. Today, the Democrats showed a bit of a spine. Good on them yesterday for boycotting the committee hearing, and good on them today for at least putting up a fight. I still don't think there's any way to stop Amy Coney Barrett from being seated on the Supreme Court, but I wanted to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it's what we need to do is make sure that it's clear to voters in certain states specific that, with Lindsey Graham running for re-election, Moscow Mitch, is that they're abusing their power. And with that, they have no good faith. They have no trust that you can inherit with them. Like there's nothing that you can actually work with them on. And so it's the worst idea for a state to have a person who can't negotiate with the other party. And you can't negotiate with a person you can't trust to be around. So I think that the Barrett nomination, like there's nothing we can do to stop it. So anything, they should be doing everything and anything available to them to stop and stall, because it's wrong, and they shouldn't show up and validate anything. They shouldn't do anything along those lines. And then if Biden were to win, then that will be one of the things that we'll need to investigate, because we have to still investigate the Kavanaugh part, the Kennedy part, the Deutsche Bank connection, and we have to investigate everything connected to that. Because I'll tell you what, if they bought it off, if they sat there and lobbyists met about choosing who was the next Supreme Court justice, we will find a way to remove them. We're not going to let people stay in power just because, they were built around corruption, and then they went ahead and abused their power to do this. And then during that, they committed crimes to making the selection for the nominee. It's just like, give me a break. It doesn't matter. Then we will change the laws so that we're able to take care of the problem, because this is it's either I'm just going to say that there's a lot of different options available, but that's another problem where we have to investigate and then figure out what the remedy and solution would be, because it's wrong. It's plain wrong. And Coney Barrett doesn't represent the United States of America. Give me a break. And it's definitely not enough with the whole replacing RBG. No one replaces RBG. She's irreplaceable. And keep in mind that, again, Democrats, there's not much that can be done. It's right around an election, so everybody's got also to focus on that. I think that what happens, this is how Lindsey Graham loses, is he abused his power here, and I think that South Carolinians won't be having it.
As I've been saying, good. Bye. I'd like to see him out on the street along with the rest of them. But Scott, I appreciate the time and the thoughts. It's always good talking with you.
Vote, 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 and volunteer. You can volunteer for us at thelastweekends.org/onward.
There you go. We'll make sure we get links out on social media how folks can do that. But Scott, good stuff. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, brother.
Our good friend Scott Dworkin, co-founder of the Democratic Coalition, also the host of the fabulous Dworkin Report. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
In northern Colorado, firefighters scrambling to contain the monster Cameron Peak fire burning since mid-August, now the largest wildfire in state history.
Massive Colorado wildfires forced thousands to evacuate. Wind and solar energy, now the cheapest energy in the world. Plus,
the future rests in renewable energy.
Joe Biden talks clean energy and infrastructure jobs at ABC Town Hall.
Did Donald Trump talk about it at the NBC Town Hall?
Nope.
Weird. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Let's talk about wildfires, aka the coronavirus of the forest.
True. They're getting worse, not going away, costing Americans billions, are taking people's lives, and the President of the United States is clueless about them, in denial, and wishes we'd stop talking about it. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, even though there are more Republican Donald Trump voters in California than any other state in the Union, he really hates California.
Yes, he must, because Trump is jerking around with disaster aid for California. First, the Trump administration late last week very publicly rejected California's request for disaster aid from record-breaking wildfires, saying Trump concurred that California didn't deserve it. And then after the completely predictable public outcry, Trump reversed himself.
He does that a lot, doesn't he?
Yep, and Colorado residents may now get to see if Trump plans to jerk them around too. Thousands were forced to evacuate from the new Calwood fire near Boulder that erupted over the weekend, straining firefighting resources already struggling to contain the explosive Cameron Peak fire near Fort Collins. That one has burned since August and has grown to be the largest fire in the state's history.
So 5 of the 6 largest fires in California history have taken place this year here in California, and now the largest fire in Colorado history also this year. But I'm sure it's just a coincidence.
Well, 2020 is one of the worst wildfire seasons ever for both California and Colorado, driven by high winds and extremely dry conditions, especially in Colorado, as October snows have failed to appear. Climate scientists warn that wildfires are now hotter, more intense, and more destructive because of man-made climate change.
Did Donald Trump complain that Colorado doesn't rake their leaves in the forests?
Not yet.
I'm sure he'll get around to it.
New wildfires have also erupted in Utah as well.
Oh, well, he definitely won't complain about them not raking leaves in Utah.
Well, the 2020 fire season has been historic in the U.S. West, with nearly every state battling active wildfires. More than 46,000 fires have burned this year in the United States, scorching more than 8 million acres so far.
And more than 4 million of them have been right here in California.
In Brazil, a heat wave has spread across a large swath of South America, setting multiple records and triggering wildfires in the world's largest tropical wetland. The New York Times reports that roughly a quarter of the vast Pantanal wetlands in Brazil, one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, have burned in wildfires intensified by climate change. Wildfires also leave much more behind than just destroyed forests and homes. A new study warns that rising smoke plumes contain more than just lung-damaging particles, but can also contain cancer-causing chemicals in the smoke that disperse into the air, the soil, water, and even into indoor dust. But they say more research is needed to understand how much and how to mitigate these chemical contaminants. In U.S. politics, at a town hall hosted by ABC News late last week, held after Donald Trump pulled out of a scheduled presidential debate, former Vice President Joe Biden got an opportunity to expand without interruption on his proposals to create jobs in upgrading the nation's infrastructure and transitioning to 100% clean energy.
We're going to put 500,000 charging stations on new highways we're building and all highways we're building. There are well over 100,000 wells that are left uncapped in the region. We could hire 128,000 of these people who are working in the industry to cap these wells and get a good salary doing it now. Put close to 1 million people to work by weatherizing 4 million buildings and 2 million homes.
The NBC News town hall with Donald Trump aired at the same time, but climate policy and jobs did not come up. Climate is a topic in the final presidential debate of 2020 on Thursday, so for the first time in U.S. history, climate change will be a topic of all 3 general election debates.
We'll see. Donald Trump is working the refs, whining about the moderator and the topic, so we'll see if climate change is still in by the time they get there.
Finally, there is some very good news. The infamously cautious and conservative International Energy Agency finally confirms previous research showing that wind and solar power are now the cheapest form of new electricity in nearly all of the world today and will continue to fall in price. The report suggests the transition to clean electricity is unstoppable.
That is good news. For much more on all of these stories and the many we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I tell you, I hope Scott's right. I hope they're able to walk and chew bubble gum at the same time. I hope they're able to hold people accountable. Ultimately, as I said, one of the biggest problems I had with the Obama administration was they didn't go after those Wall Street criminals. They didn't hold those people accountable for what they did to our economy under the guise of we just need to move forward. And I fear again, it's going to be the same kind of messaging. We need to bring people together. We need unity, and investigating Trump and the Trump crime syndicate for all the stuff they've done would just be divisive, and we need to put it behind us. No, I think we need to lock people up. I think if you committed a crime, you go to jail. Just that simple to me. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the big debate. Also, maybe a little bit about the Trump crime family as well. I've asked our good friend, former Congressman and current fabulous political analyst, Bob Ney, to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thank you for that introduction, Rick. By the way, I've always called them and other people do too, the banksters.
Yes.
Gangsters, banksters. And there was just a story, I threw it out there, I think, about a week ago, and it involved overseas dealings, and nobody went to jail. Nobody. They fined them for corrupt activity in Singapore, but nobody went to jail.
Yeah, I mean, we never lock the rich people up. They never get thrown into the general population. It's just us poor people. And then I look at the Purdue Pharmaceutical, the potential settlement there. They're going to plead guilty to 3 felony accounts. Anybody going to prison? Any of those guys who were selling that stuff, who were writing emails selling, I want to sell OxyContin like we sell Doritos. Any of those people going to see the inside of a cell? I doubt it.
Monsanto hired Alice Fisher, and she's in my book. Alice is the one who prosecuted me. They hired her, and Monsanto, who poisoned people, got off. She pulled strings in the Justice Department. I'm looking at that stuff, and I'm like, look, how do you find the company guilty of criminal activity, but no person in the company is guilty?
Yeah, especially in this day and age where corporations are people.
Right. Yeah, I didn't mean to get off on that, but I think it's a really sore subject for a lot of Americans.
Yeah, me.
Yeah, right.
Sorry, and every time I bring it up about Obama, I've got a couple of knocks against Obama. I liked the guy. I thought he was a good president. There are a number of things he did that was just flat out stupid and wrong. And one of them was not having daily perp walks and daily DOJ pressers on, hey, we're holding this criminal accountable and they're going to see prison time.
Sure.
I digress.
Right.
I did bring up the OxyContin thing. I did want to get your thoughts on that because, the settlement, the proposed settlement, 3 felony counts, something like $8.3 billion in fines that they're going to use to divvy up and do some kind of treatments or infrastructure stuff. And also this potential move from a profit-seeking corporation to something of a non-profit. I'm curious your thoughts on that as someone who's dealt with addiction and dealt with people who are addicted. Any thoughts on that settlement?
Well, yeah, of course, Purdue Pharma is pleading guilty, and I think $8 billion, right, is the settlement.
Yeah, 8.3 is what they said.
Right, and they're pleading and admitting that they enabled the supply of drugs with absolutely no legitimate medical purpose. And so it's a deal with the Department of Justice, and it really it's still going to face, though, I think there'll be thousands of cases brought by states and families, so that still can occur, as I understand it, which is a good step that states can still step in, But they had put out a statement that they were deeply, regretful for, what they did, blah, blah, blah.
Getting caught.
And then, of course, the firm has sought protection from litigation. They did by filing bankruptcy, So it's got to be approved by the court as they, move on with the Justice Department. But I think that, that they should have held. I'm glad they have to pay something, and I hope it goes for rehab, for people because they shouldn't go to jail. They need rehab. For especially, I sponsor people in addiction. A lot of people I sponsor are opioid addicted, but none of the perpetrators, are going to, they've exposed the truth, but none of the perpetrators are going to be held accountable.
Which is why, again, it's another one of those things where the wealthy and the powerful get away scot-free, and the rest of us, we end up having to clean up the mess. And $8.3 billion sounds like a lot of money, but I don't know that it really is, considering the last statistic I saw, 72,000 people last year lost their lives to opioid overdoses. And, I assume it's going to be, just as bad, if not worse, this year, because this administration hasn't done anything to change that. In fact, it's gotten worse under Donald Trump because they haven't really done anything. A lot of lip service, but no actual things getting done. So maybe I hope that $8.3 billion goes to treatment so that people don't lose loved ones. But it's heartbreaking because I actually know a couple of people who've lost loved ones to opioid addiction, and it's I'd like to see some justice.
Yeah, I've lost this year alone 3 people that I had sponsored who were, in addiction. And in the 13 years I've been sponsoring people, to try to help them with their addictions, in the 13 years, Rick, it has just went up, escalating in the amount of people from when I started doing this that are opioid addicted. It just escalated. You can see some kind of bell curve in the last 10, 11, 12 years. So again, they've got a criminal penalty in this, but nobody's going to pay a criminal penalty. That knew what they were doing.
Yeah, I think a member of the Sackler family, any member of the family. Sure. Take the outcast. Somebody's got to be behind bars. Somebody's got to be behind one of those tiny little windows that Trump is so fixated on.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
So let's move off of this onto the debate.
Okay.
Tiny little windows again. Is it me, or does it sound like he's fixated on jail?
No, I heard that today, all day, about that people are going to have tiny little windows. Seniors are going. I listened tonight to the Florida speech. Seniors are not going to have air conditioning, so they're going to fry in the summer, and they're going to freeze in the winter. I did hear that today. I don't remember reading that in any of the Biden proposals, but I heard that today. And of course, your home state, I knew they would start to go crazy today, with ads and everything else in the state of Pennsylvania. I knew that would happen, of course.
It's really the only issue that he can use to divide us here. But to be honest, the fracking issue is extremely divisive in this state because there are some who make their living off of it. and in areas that have been depressed for a very long time. So they're like, finally, we've got a way to support our families. I get it. It's a horribly divisive issue, and it's all they've got. But let's start with your thoughts on the big debate. Clearly, I thought Joe Biden won. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, there's no doubt Joe Biden won. The key, the generic key for Biden, and then we can go into specifics of, why he won. I think his closing statement was just good, right to the point, looking at the camera. It was emotional. You connected with him, that he's in your house talking to you, caring about you, and he did that, I thought, quite well. But in a generic way, looking at the debate, the big key was to not have a gaffe. Don't have a gaffe. Now, it made it a little bit harder, not a gaffe, he didn't have one, but it made it a little bit harder because Trump was, not out of control as he normally had been or would be. He wasn't out of control for the most part. And so that made a little bit, I don't think it pulled any votes in either direction, but it made it a little bit different scenario. I was surprised at how controlled he was.
Yeah. No, I was.
But I think clearly Biden won the debates, and there was a lot of points that were made, and he kept referring back to people, which is a big key, to show about the character. He kept referring to that too, so I thought that was a plus.
No, I thought last night, and this after I had watched it and it had absorbed, I really let it bang around in my head. I thought last night was the first time we saw Joe Biden as Joe Biden, where he was himself. And what I mean by that is, I've met him a couple of times, and he's somebody who's quick, to kind of, joke around. He's quick with a line. I thought he was more himself than he'd been in the past. If that makes any sense. Instead of being, Obama's vice president, I think he really kind of strided into himself there.
Well, you're right. I served with Joe Biden. I worked with Joe Biden in his office on certain issues, a couple of overseas issues we worked on with his office. And Joe Biden, that I saw earlier this year in the debates, because I've been asked a lot, if you know somebody. I mean, I don't know him, like everyday lunch buddy or something, but I knew him. And yet you're asked about it, and he was just, how do I say this? Just a little bit off, not the Joe Biden you kind of knew, right?
Yep.
But last night, I agree. Last night, he was Joe Biden, and it just like it snapped back, like some of the the pressure was off, or he didn't have to worry about trying to conform to something for the primary debates. Anyway, he was, I thought, more of himself last night than he's been in a while.
Yeah, I mean, because some of the one-liners that he had were not things that you scripted. I mean, you knew where some of the one-liners where they had prepared him for. Hey, we want to make sure we get this, this sound bite in. There were a couple of those moments that were just organic, and it just it was him being him and flowing right into it. And my favorite one was there's Abe Lincoln over there. That was my favorite moment where he was like, he's the most racist president we've ever had.
Right.
But
and the other thing that he does, and it's been a habit of his, and so for me, when I see it, I'm like, okay. He goes, "Come on, man." He's always done that.
Yeah.
Come on, man. If you look at his history, and he said that, and it's just kind of a, I don't know, casual, everyday term you can kind of relate, to your buddy you're talking to down in the coffee shop, and he goes, "Come on, man."
Yeah.
So he did that a couple of times.
Yeah, I don't think the debate moved the needle any way, shape, or form. I don't think. I think we're in our camps already. It's just a matter of tallying up the votes at this point.
Turnout.
But I thought it was his kind of coming out and being. I'm hoping who he's going to be as president. Just my thoughts. I wanted to move into the Supreme Court stuff. The Democrats, showed a little bit of spine today. A little bit of spine yesterday, not a lot. They can't stop anything. I wanted to get your thoughts on the tactics of this day.
Well, as far as the of not showing up at the committee, I don't think it's like, wow, the end of the world. I think it would have been better if they showed up and voted no and were loud about it. I understand they, didn't go in a protest of the way this is done. I mean, I understand that. I don't think it's the end of the world. I don't think it turns a Senate seat against the Democratic side. But I thought, well, they could have most likely just show up, vote no, and kind of yell about it, but they decided a different route. But as far as this, they were kind of in a box. The way this came in the last throes of the election, the fact that the Republicans were throwing the Catholic card out there, I thought that they did the best job they could do with a no-win situation.
Yeah, and
no win.
There is no win, and this is where you have to understand this is a power grab. This is a power move. It is what it is, and I hope Democrats will learn the lesson from it, because Republicans have been very good when they have power of actually using it.
Well, they use it, and then on top of it, I've been to many Lincoln Day dinner over years and years back, and the Republicans have always pushed very hard in states that control the apportionment process for redistricting, that you got to remember the Secretary of State, you got to remember the in Ohio the auditor that sits on the board. Same thing, the Senate. They've always focused a lot on trying to remember who controls that power of the pen to carve districts and to appoint Supreme Court justices.
Yep.
And they focused a lot on the Senate last time.
It seems like someone actually read the rules.
Right, exactly.
This is where I keep telling my Democratic friends, you got to learn the rules. Learn the rules, use them, and when you get the power, actually use it. And I've been saying, if the Democrats get the Senate, I think they move to put 3 additional justices on the court, and we even the court out. At least that's my view on it. And we make it, we admit it's political. I would love them to say, you know what, we're gonna have 6 justices on the right, 6 justices on the left, and you guys are gonna have to hammer out a decision. But we'll see how that plays out.
Right. I think they have to be bold. If they're not bold, then they're not going to be able to maintain what they have. And in a lot of ways, for example, if you look at the House, Nancy Pelosi's been bold about things.
Yeah.
And you have to be.
Yeah,
it's a blood sport business. It's not for the faint of heart.
No, absolutely. If anything, take a page out of the Gingrich book or the Tom DeLay book, and when you've got the gavel, you use it.
You use it. Exactly.
That will be the message. But Bob, I appreciate the thoughts and the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Oh, thank you, Rick.
All righty, our good friend Bob Ney. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back to wrap things up. Stick around. You'll listen to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1995. That was the day that the AFL-CIO convention convened in New York City. At the convention, John Sweeney was elected president of the Federation. It was the first contested election for president in AFL-CIO history. He ran with a slate of labor leaders, including Rich Trumka, who called themselves the New Voice Slate. Sweeney was president of the Service Employees International Union. He was a New Yorker born in the Bronx. He started his career in labor working for the International Ladies Garment Workers Union, then moving to SEIU as a union rep. He represented SEIU Local 32B in New York City during 2 strikes of apartment maintenance workers during the 1970s. In 1980, he was elected president of the International SEIU, a post he held for 15 years. membership in SEIU nearly doubled from 625,000 to 1.1 million under his leadership. Sweeney gave a powerful speech for his candidacy at the convention. He said, quote, "Workers look at their paychecks, the political system, and the public debate and wonder why nobody is speaking for me. Then, in fear and frustration, they look for leadership to the Rush Limbaughs who seek scapegoats rather than solutions for problems of stagnant wages, corporate greed, and a fractured society." He pledged that under his leadership, the AFL-CIO would move to commit more resources to organizing these workers. When he won election, Sweeney held good to his campaign promise. He instituted a new initiative, the Union Summer Program, to involve college students in the labor movement. He expanded organizing efforts in the South and Southwest. John Sweeney served 5 terms as president of the AFL-CIO. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the news media didn't really pick up on this. There was a right-wing extremist, one of the Boogaloo Boys, who evidently opened fire on the Minneapolis 3rd District Police Department. And sparked violence there in Minneapolis during the George Floyd protests back in May. Evidently, the FBI said in a sworn affidavit that they released today that guy named, I'm not going to say his name, 26-year-old guy from Texas, was charged with 1 count of interstate travel to participate in a riot. I'm not sure what the hell that means. But evidently, the guy he fired 13 rounds at the precinct while police officers were inside, and ran away shouting "Justice for Floyd." And you don't hear much about this. You don't hear much of the instigators. And this is an example of one of these people trying to stir up trouble, and then make it look like it's somebody else. You're not going to see this on Fox News. You're not going to hear about it anywhere else. It's not around that often. And for all those people who hit me with, "Well, we need to stop the violence in our streets," understand a lot of it is agent provocateurs. If you've read labor's history, the employer class, the wealth class, always figures out how to interject a little violence in there, so that they can use the long arm of the law to come in with the iron fist and crush it. And, so when you see these riots and you see the sparks that cause the looting and all this, you gotta start asking some questions, because it's not all of the people. Look, I condemn rioting, I condemn looting, I condemn burning buildings down. That's just common sense. But I am willing to step back and say, who started it? And how do we stop that? And how do we stop falling for the framing that they want us to bite into? And the fact that it's taken this long, this happened back in May, to actually charge this guy with something, tells me that there's a problem. Tells me there's an absolute problem. And we better do something. And look, here's the thing. We also found out that there were a bunch of nitwits who were going to try and kidnap the governor of Ohio. Again, another one of these moments where these right-wing extremist groups, these white supremacist groups, are doing horrible stuff. But yet I don't hear many of my Trump supporters condemning that. In fact, I actually talked to a couple people who, I never heard that. And you send them the stories, and, I don't believe it. It's fake news. We live in scary, scary, divided times. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com, that's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. And as always, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Safety after being trapped for 69 days. Workers had been mining copper and gold 2,300 feet down at the San Jose mine near the northern city of Copiapo when the mine caved in early August. The company waited several hours to notify authorities, and rescue efforts only began 2 days later. Trapped miners initially tried to escape through ventilation shafts, but found the required ladders missing. Each route they attempted was blocked by fallen rock or threatened additional collapse. A state-owned mining company took over the rescue efforts, and soon they began. As geologist Serena Sorensen noted, prospecting for people. Initial exploratory boreholes failed to locate miners because mine shaft maps had never been updated. Rescuers had no idea whether miners were even still alive. Finally, 17 days later, the 8th borehole reached them. The miners tapped on the drill and taped notes to it, alerting rescuers above that they were indeed alive and well. Food, medicine, and other supplies were lowered down to them as rescue efforts intensified. Mini cameras were also lowered down, and miners videotaped messages of their continued ordeal. They told how they continued to search for possible escape routes and agreed to ration their limited food supplies so they could all survive. The first of 3 drilling plans to free the miners began. It was an international effort. The Chilean Navy consulted with NASA to design and construct the rescue pods. Throughout the entire process, rescuers worked to prevent additional cave-ins and rock falls. Finally, the extraction process began, and in less than 48 hours, all miners emerged as heroes.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So again, if you listen to Donald Trump in the final debate, you'd think everything was great. Just peachy, everything's great. The economy's just great. Never mind those millions of people who are unemployed. Never mind the millions of people who are uninsured, even though he was out there heavily touting the employer-based healthcare system that they love to keep throwing. Everyone loves their employer-based healthcare. Never mind them. And never mind the fact that things aren't great. Never mind the fact that older workers are facing unemployment at a much higher rate than younger workers for the first time since they've been keeping records. We also find out that women are unemployed at a higher level than men for the first time since, I guess the early to mid 1960s. Something definitely amiss. In here to share some thoughts on where we are with the economy and where things are going. I've asked Diana Bosch to come talk with us. She's a policy analyst with the Women's Initiative at the Center for American Progress. Diana, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, did you happen to see the big debate?
I did, yes.
And everything's great, isn't it?
So, according to Trump, yes.
Before we get into all this stuff, did you see anything in that moment where Donald Trump looked at women and said, you know what, you're going to be okay?
Yeah, I saw Donald Trump lying. I saw him just blatantly ignoring the facts and the economic statistics about how this country is doing right now. We're in the midst of one of the biggest recessions in our history, and in fact, the worst recession ever for women. So I think, the facts are out there, and this is not a great situation for women, and we need to be paying attention to that.
Now, you guys have a piece out. The shambolic response to the public health and economic crisis has women on the brink as job recovery stalls. Why are women in this economy being hit harder than they were in past economies? I know, like in the past, like in the Bush collapse of 2008, women saw a lower unemployment rate than men because, a lot of the jobs that women were doing at the time were were much more needed, I guess, taking care of our elderly, service jobs that have to be done. Why is this different?
That's a great question, and it's actually because this is the first recession where service sector jobs jobs in restaurants and at shopping, clothing stores are the jobs that we've actually lost. Previous recessions have been production, manufacturing jobs are the first to go. And because of the nature of the coronavirus, we can't be in person. We can't be in person indoors gathering. Service sector jobs have been the hardest hit. And the majority of people who perform service sector jobs are women. And so that's why you're seeing, for the first time ever, since the Bureau of Labor Statistics started gathering data on women in 1963, this is the first time that we've ever seen women lose more jobs than men.
And could that give us some insight into why another stimulus plan hasn't come around? I mean, it's curious to me, and maybe you've got some insight that I don't have. It's curious to me that when the Democrats are telling Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, or more, I should go Mitch McConnell, saying, here, take anything you want. We're going to give you basically a blank check to prop up the economy so that you look good for the election. It's curious to me that they haven't taken it. Could it be that maybe, I don't know, but that it would benefit women more than men?
I can't speak for them. I don't know why something hasn't been done. Since a lot of the early relief packages in the spring, a lot of those benefits expired over the summer, and workers and their families are the ones suffering. I know there have been some negotiations that have been attempted in Congress, and I'm not sure the reason that they haven't, been able to pass something. But in the meantime, women are the ones suffering. They're the ones who've yet to gain jobs back. I mean, since before the recession, there are still 5.8 million fewer women who are employed. They are still bearing the burden of caregiving with children at home. And so they need those relief packages. They need unemployment benefits and stimulus and food stamps and everything else. And so it's actually a shame, really, to see that there's not been significant action from the Trump administration or Republicans in Congress.
Yeah, I mean, I look at this, and the caregiving aspect of things is something I've talked about for years. That we need to have a way to address our needs. We need someone to care for our elderly. We need someone to care for our children. And this pandemic has just highlighted the fact that we've failed all along, and that we're in a crisis moment. And it's now falling again onto those who can least shoulder the burden.
You're totally right. And I mean, before the pandemic, we were asking women to juggle both work and caregiving. Women have always taken care of their families. They've done the majority of childcare, of housework. And we were asking them before the pandemic to make it work, find the balance, right, without providing any sort of paid sick days or paid family and medical leave or affordable childcare. And then the pandemic hit and everything fell down because we didn't have the policies in place from the beginning to actually support women and to support people with family caregiving responsibilities.
Yeah,
so that's what we need now.
No, you're right. But what do you say to the person who goes, "Come on, Diana, the jobs you're talking about, those low wage service sector jobs, those are always going to be vulnerable. We're not talking about the high skilled, high training, high education attained kind of jobs. They were able to do better, right?"
In some aspects, potentially, yes. They could have transitioned to work from home. But what about that grocery store clerk? That job is essential. And low-wage work can be essential work. And we should reward it. And we should protect those workers. In fact, millions of workers across the country didn't have access to a single paid sick day before the pandemic hit. And we want those people to be serving us food and helping us at the grocery store. We need to be actually protecting those workers and valuing the work that they do by paying them a living wage and providing them the workplace protections and benefits that every worker deserves, especially those doing essential work.
Yeah, this is where me as a labor guy says that every person who lived through this pandemic and had to show up to work, as you've pointed out, without a paid sick day, without any ability to have any say in your workplace, in the environment and the safety conditions that you endured, this is the moment where I would hope, and I'm still hopeful, we're going to see a mass of organizing of people demanding a voice on the job and pushing to unionize, because at the end of the day, unions are about wages, hours, conditions. The heavy part of it being conditions. And sadly, as we've been talking about in this show for months, the conditions in many workplaces are deplorable.
Yes, definitely. And unions can go a long way to helping fix that problem, exactly as you said. But conditions are deplorable. Workers don't have the protective equipment they need. Employers can fire them if they don't show up to work when they're sick. We absolutely need unions, and we need policies that step in and actually give workers the protections that they deserve.
Yeah, you hit an important part there. If you don't show up to work, you get fired. And I heard Lindsey Graham and I heard all of the Republicans whining and complaining, well, we're giving an extra $600 a week to people who are unemployed. That means they're not going to go back to work. It either shows, one, that they're completely ignorant of how our system works, that if you refuse to go to work, you don't get to collect unemployment, or more likely, in my view, they know exactly how it works.